Hi, everyone. This is the Incept Connect podcast. I am John Osberg, growth strategist at Incept Digital here in Buffalo, New York. Today, I am in studio with someone who's super inspiring, who's done a lot of great work in the community, both in business and in community, and someone that I've only known for a short time, but it feels like it's been a lot longer because of the shared values that we have. So, Royce Woods, Evans Bank, welcome to the studio, my brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're in here, man. I'm glad you're in here. We just, as I kind of said, it's been maybe a few months that we started to get to know each other better. Been following you on LinkedIn. You've been following me on LinkedIn. Your message is something that resonates with me. It's one of community, one of togetherness. And so that's what we're here. That's what we're here to talk about, right? Mm-hmm. So Incept Connect is all about talking, or I should say featuring movers and shakers, builders of community and commerce that are doing great things and are really just trying to continue to catalyze growth. So you are the perfect fit for that. So
humbled to be on the podcast.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate,
yes, sir. Appreciate you being in here. So for our millions of viewers and watchers, listeners to this podcast, some more about yourself. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Royce Woods, Chief Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Development Officer at Evans Bank. Really excited about it. Been there 2 years. Pittsburgh native. Yeah. Born and raised in Pittsburgh, spent some time jumping around the country, but have been a proud Buffalonian now since 2016. I'm a proud dad. I got a 6-year-old son, and I joke around with people that I'm raising a Bills fan. Yeah. So when he wants to get under my skin, he tells me that the Buffalo Bills are better than the Pittsburgh Steelers. But really moved to Buffalo in 2016, and I was always open-minded to moving to Buffalo because I saw just such tremendous opportunity within the community. I felt like these Rust Belt cities, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, were all dealing with a lot of the same social economic challenges, and I just saw such potential within the region. And it's been an amazing 5 or 6 years for me up here, and it's one of the reasons why I stay. Is like I just see some tremendous growth and progress within the region that, luckily and humbly, I'm happy to be part of.
Right on, man. Right on. And so what brought you to Buffalo? I know you've done a lot of work in economic development and community building. So what was it that brought you here?
That's also like part of the story for me and part of the perseverance. I moved to Buffalo married. I met my and unfortunately divorced, but met my now ex-wife in Pittsburgh at the time. And I remember on our first date, she told me she was from Buffalo and never wanted to go back. And, that was 10 years ago now. And, we moved to Atlanta for a couple years. While we were in Atlanta, we got pregnant with our son, and she really wanted to gravitate back home, back to her base. And I said, I had traveled up here pretty regularly with her and had been exposed to some people and some leadership within the community. And just saw tremendous opportunity here, from an economic development standpoint. At that point in time in my career, I had kind of transitioned from traditional banking to economic development work. And I felt like Buffalo was getting ready to pop. So I was always open-minded to move in and finally pulled the trigger and relocated in August of 16.
Well, we're glad to have you as a transplant Buffalonian, man.
Absolutely.
I tell you, just in like I said now a couple of times, just in the short time that we've gotten to know each other, but then having watched your journey over the last few years, you've had a lot of accolades bestowed on you, and for great reason, for what you do in the community, the way you lead. We were talking off air, and I call it off air. We're not on air, but before we started actually recording, authentic, real, organic leadership. It's something that I've talked about in other podcasts just recently with our mutual friend, Mercedes Wilson. And yesterday she had a great quote. She said, "I have a heart to help," and that's real. And people recognize that realness and they gravitate to you. What have you seen in the community so far in your 2 years with the bank, but then 6 years here in Buffalo? What have you seen? The good, the bad, and maybe not, whatever. It's the good, the bad, the ugly is the phrase. But like some of the things you've seen in our community that are good, that are highlights that we want to focus on, but also then some of the things that we can maybe use some improvement on.
It's the same thing that I love about Buffalo is what really made it really challenging as an outsider, non-native, to break into this community. And now that I say a couple years into my tenure here, it's like the same thing that makes you laugh, makes you cry. It is such a close-knit community. not just like personal social circles, but business circles as well. You know, a lot of these people have been working, interacting, growing up together 20 plus years of establishing those connections. And then someone who is not born and raised in this community, it's hard to identify where some of those informal social circles are at. And that's really what makes things happen within the city. That was initially really challenging to break into when you don't have that social circle, that social support here within the area. But as you spend more time in the community, as you really start to volunteer, spend time with boots on the ground, and you build up really the equity, the sweat equity from putting it in, you start to get access to those circles and build those relationships. You know, I've heard people refer to Buffalo as the large living room.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and it's I found that to be the case in the last couple of years. You know, everyone kind of knows everybody, and it's a big part of the strength. I think, you know, in the last couple of years, we have really started to do an awesome job of changing the national perception of what Western New York and what Buffalo is about. And as a transplant here, that was always a stickler for me. So, you know, I would have, you know, people in my network from across the country that would throw me a routine jab about living in Western New York, whether it be about Buff Wings or the Bills or the weather. And I thought like we're really on the cusp, and we really started to change the national perception of what Western New York is as an entrepreneurship hotspot.
That's true.
As one of the most affordable cities in the country, as an area that's really growing and thriving. And, you know, I'm excited to continue that progress.
Right.
You know, it was like one of my largest concerns with the May 14th shooting was like we had really started to really make a dent in the national perception of what Buffalo was. You know, like I said, you know, you get the jokes about the weather, about a community that is historically ranked as one of the top 5 most segregated major American cities in the country. And I thought like we had really started to really make a significant dent in that national perception. And then May 14th happened. And for me, you know, my motivation now is, you know, I wake up every day really trying to work my butt off to create a Buffalo in which my son could grow and thrive, where he doesn't have to live under the cloud in which, you know, the largest racially motivated mass shooting happened within his community, within his city. And I think it's going to take all of us, you know, to continue the economic and community development efforts to get up from under that cloud. And I think, you know, even 2 months after the fact, as we all continue to heal and grow as a community, we got to recognize now that, you know, that's always going to be with us. You know, even people that are not from the east side of Buffalo or that don't, you know, venture over to the east side of Buffalo, it might be easier for them to forget and move on. But people who live or work within that community, like that's never going to go away. And that's always going to be there and present. And I think all of the leaders within the community, not just the Black leaders, but everybody within the Western New York community, you know, we have to work diligently and twice as hard right now to pull Buffalo out from under that cloud that I think is going to persist over Jefferson Avenue and the Black community for a decade or two.
Yeah, I appreciate your insight on that, Royce, and something that you share with me in our conversations, lunch, golf, everything in between. You know, you said a couple times, you know, to me that you're the solution, right? I'm part of the solution. Can you expand maybe on what that means for the watchers and listeners of how they can be part of the solution?
Absolutely, man. I think, you know,
I'm honored, by the way, that you said that to me. I appreciate that, man.
You know what?
I'll never forget when you said that to me in person and a couple times in text. Sorry. Continue.
I don't mind, you know, giving flowers and accolades where they're deserved. And I think, I definitely quickly identify you as somebody that is part of the solution, because if we're going to overcome these challenges that we face as a community as regards to segregation, we have to do it with diverse folks. It can't just be all African Americans and Black people on the east side. We need our white colleagues and coworkers and friends and family to support that and be open-minded to it. There are still many in this community, unfortunately, that still don't believe totally in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and fairness for all. So when I come across colleagues who are non-minority, who understand that, who share their platform and their resources to promote equity and fairness, it makes us all the more stronger as a community. When you have, diverse individuals and non-diverse individuals all advocating for equity and fairness on both sides. And I think you do an amazing job of that. And I think it shows tremendous leadership on your behalf. And one thing that, I've always recognized and appreciated about you is it doesn't seem forced. It is authentic. And you can pick up on that. The community picks up on that. The people pick up on that. When it's not authentic and genuine, it does more harm than it does help. And I always feel like you're genuine and honest with that perspective and who you are. And as I learn more about your story, it just seems like it's who you have always been and who you were raised to be. So I think as, a leader within the African American community, man, I'm always appreciative of people in other pockets of the city that express, willingness to help, ability to share platforms and promote. At the end of the day, all of our Buffalonians need to be pulling in the right direction. We're all Cosmo Bills fans, right?
That's right.
So I think we need everybody to solve these issues, but I've always found your approach to be organic, authentic, and that's what we're going to need to really grow the region and improve and change the narrative.
I appreciate that, man. That means a lot. I think. I really do. I mean, it wasn't a virtuous signal. It was just part of the conversation. It made sense because it's something that you said that stuck with me over the last several months, and it's energized me to keep doing. And how can I keep doing more to support others and all with that underscore of all in bold and italicize that word all. How can I keep doing that? I think one of the biggest things for me and for those that are watching and listening that we can talk briefly about is what's our greatest teacher, right? And I'll just answer my own rhetorical question. It's experience. Yeah. I grew up in a home that I had two parents that worked, with the public, two that are kind of like medical focused, mental health, physical health stuff. Mom's a pharmacist, dad's a psychologist, and both of them worked in Niagara Falls. They work with people of all different backgrounds, of all walks of life, and I love my mom, but I gravitate towards my dad in some of the work he did because he was actually a professor of psychology at Attica Prison for almost 15 years. And to this day, he stays in touch with students that have since, students of his from the prison that have since actually gotten out. And I wish I had my phone, it's over there, and I wouldn't do it on air, but I would just share with you that my dad recently sent me and my family a commencement speech he did. I think it was in the late 80s. And I've only read some of it because it's kind of long, and I'll read it. Don't worry, Dad, I'll read it soon. But there was an echo that was written, like a review of his commencement speech, and then just who he was to Attica Prison and their educational system. And I'll tell you, man, I got it last week, and I get emotional talking about it. It brought me to tears when I read it because of the impact that he had on the people that were around him. But also those individuals that were potentially put in there wrongfully or were over sentenced, right? We know some of the sentencing laws in New York State are pretty harsh. And by pretty, I mean very. And so, the point I'm starting to ramble, but it's experience. So for me, I grew up in a home where I saw it, I heard it, I felt it. And that we're the same person. We may have different, again, skin hues, if we're talking kind of candidly. We may have different heritages and different maybe experiences and things that we've seen. But at the end of the day, you've got dreams, you've got passions, you've got fears, you've got insecurities. I've got the same. We're the same in that regard. So as much as I color diversity, I also color that we're the same person within diversity, and that's how we come together closer. And rant. So experience though, I mean, I'd love to hear more about the experiences that you had and how you've started to spread your wings in the world of diversity. Because I really think that'd be huge for people to hear from the tip of the spear, if you will, in the worlds of diversity and inclusion. Like, what can we do to be more diverse focused, more inclusive in our daily life?
I agree with you in regards to like experience being the greatest teacher. I think, I was blessed to be one of the few households within the African American community that I grew up in to be in a double parent home, where I had both my mom and my dad, and they definitely exposed us to a lot of experiences, but they also created an environment where, don't be afraid of failure. Failure is a great, experience builder and learner as well. In regards to diversity, man, as I get thrusted into this chief diversity officer role, it's really exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time because everybody's at different levels within their diversity growth and learning and development. For me, diversity has just always been a strong part of who I am. My father's African American, my mother is German and Irish. My mother was raised Catholic. They were married in a synagogue. We grew up Baptist. I went to a Catholic high school, and then I ended up marrying a woman from the Muslim community. It just seems like I always seek out diverse perspectives, and it's just been such a big part of my strength and my growth and development. And everybody's at different points there. I think more than anything else, like what I'm really excited about right now and what I've seen in the community and country really in the last year or two is really highlighting the business value of diversity, the improvements and efficiencies, the removing of business blind spots that open up and create opportunities as a result of diverse perspectives. I got a finance background. I've always very much believed in capitalism to a certain degree, and that's where I feel like we're really starting to change the narrative and grow within the diversity, equity, and inclusion spaces as we really highlight within the private sector the financial benefits, the gains, and getting them to understand, diverse teams are more efficient, diverse companies have higher profitability ratios, things of that nature, the business case for it. Which motivates a lot of people in some degrees, but everybody's at different phases within their learning and development in that regards to it. I think we're at such a unique time in the history of Buffalo, not just because of May 14th, but a lot of the unrest that's happened in the community over the last 2 or 3 years. I think it's been incredibly challenging to be a leader within this community or a public official in this community the last 2 years. But a lot of progress has come from it, from the chaos and from the disruption. And I think as Buffalonians and Western New Yorkers, we're starting to really realize that we're in this together. This is all our hometown and our region. And we're starting to really emphasize desegregating some of our communities. And I see people, reaching out and venturing over east of Maine that may have never, ever done so. So I'm really excited about that. I think we're really making progress in that regard.
I love it, man. Thank you for sharing. There's a lot of great insights in there. Staying with what you kind of finished with at the end there, that I love what you said. Everyone's in a different stage of their diversity growth, their pattern, their journey. A mutual friend of ours, Kyrie Stevens, who's also a beacon of light, of hope, of passion, and of course of diversity and inclusion. Kyrie, I remember we were having lunch a few months back too, and I think again going back to experience, you can't grow in your diversity and inclusion journey, if that's what we will call it, kind of phrase it, term it. You can't grow unless you're having that experience, right, with people who are different than you. And I actually said something to Kyrie that day that I don't know if I shared this with you. I may have when I saw you when we were together for Juneteenth. But I remember he said, he pulled me to the side after maybe we were finishing lunch or something. He's like, hey, I just wanted to say something like, you said something earlier that wasn't necessarily, perfectly aligned. And I want to kind of tell you what you said and why it's not and what you can say. And my immediate reaction was, oh no, I'm sorry. And he was just so adamant about, don't be sorry. This is all part of your journey. And so without having a conversation, Kyrie, for those who don't know, is an African-American gentleman, young man, father, community builder. He taught me, I can't talk. He taught me something that day that will forever stick with me. And now going forward, that will be something I don't really ever say or do again. And it was minor, it was mild, and it was out of goodness in my heart, but it was just not the right thing to say. And for those that you said could be on different paths or journeys, they may have taken it differently than maybe Kyrie, who's very seasoned like yourself. So just want to call that.
When I say you're the solution, that's what I mean. And I think, that's a great example of what I mean by that statement in regards to both, Carrier and yourself. The community has historically been so segregated. There's not been a lot of interaction in between white Buffalonians and black Buffalonians, Muslim Buffalonians and Christian Buffalonians, you know, in different pockets, North Buffalo, South Buffalo. And I think now as we're starting to merge together, there are things that are being said that, you know, without ill intent may offend. Right. And as a community, as we're coming together and healing, that's what's awesome about it. Is when I say your solution, like being open-minded to receive that constructive criticism and feedback, to learn from it and grow from it, but also on the other side, not getting offended and understanding that it's not coming from a place of ill will. It's coming from, you know, a space where lack of experience, you know, for lack of a better word, and say, okay, hey, you know, moving forward, this is kind of how I would like to be addressed. This is the language that's socially acceptable within our community circles. And man, like conversations like that are so encouraging. It makes me feel like, you know, makes me very, very optimistic about the direction that we're going into in a community, that somebody is willing to address it and the other person is willing to be open-minded in it. You know, I grew up as an athlete playing high school and college football, and like one of the best things for me about playing collegiate sports and team sports at that level was film review. Because like that level of accountability, you know, where someone on your team or your coach in front of everyone else can say, this is a mistake, right? And you can see it, and it gets addressed immediately, and you're accountable to the entire team. And I think as a community, as we start to come together and merge these different pockets within Western New York, those conversations are going to happen. You know, people are, you know, I'm encouraged to hear that they're happening, and people are open-minded to it. I think it makes us better as a community in a city.
Feeling better every day. I would just share too, to piggyback and finish that point, is I've since shared that with others in my life, where I said, you know, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, that, hey, this happened today. And just in case, like food for thought, like this is how like it should go. And again, it was minor, but regardless of minor or major, you know, I'm glad there was some corrective measuring there. And now so I think it's the ripple effect too, right? Because I'm someone who's a sharer. I certainly like to share when I learn new things, experiences, events, you know, content, places, whatever services, I like to share. So I spread that out there too, amidst others that maybe have not thought that way either, so that they avoid it going forward. So it's Kyrie dropping that wisdom on me, then I'm going to share with others, so that, again, it's like you say, building better. Speaking of that, Evans Bank, love to hear more, you know, insight as to what you, tip of the spear as the CDIO there. What's Evans doing these days for this these types of topics?
You know, I've been at Evans, it'll be 2 years in August, and what drove me out of banking in 2012 and 13 is what actually brought me back, you know, and I'm really excited to be working at a local community-based bank, which I really feel like has a specific, you know, value-add niche as a local community bank. The good thing about Evans, and the reason why I love it, is we are still a small business to a certain degree, but we're also a $2 billion publicly traded company. So while we're a local Buffalo, Western New York, Rochester area focused, you know, we can punch above our weight class in that regard. So we have a number of really cool things that are going on right now within the bank. In late 2021, we're starting to come up on a year. We opened our first East Side branch in the Westminster Commons facility on the corner of Broadway and Monroe. The branch is located in an 84-unit senior supportive housing complex. It's one of the first of its kind in the state, where it's really a senior citizens campus. Wow. So you have 84 units of senior citizen housing connected to a commercial building that has a physical therapy office, a doctor's office. There's a hair salon in there. We put our bank branch in there, with the whole concept that of making a senior community, where, you know, the senior citizens that in the residential complex had accessibility to services that they needed within, you know, 100 feet of where they're laying their head at night. So that is going really well. Something I'm tremendously proud of. We just released a request for proposal in partnership with the city of Buffalo, the Buffalo Area Land Bank, MMB Realty, to build single-family homes on Buffalo's east side, right near the branch. Really excited about that. You know, if you if you spend any time on the east side of Buffalo, you become very aware of the inventory of vacant lots.
Yeah.
Right. And I've always seen that as potential. And, as we're going through the housing boom here in Western New York now, a lot of people are relocating from the suburbs back into the city core. Really excited to be building workforce housing, single family homes in that community. I've always felt like you build community with entrepreneurs and small businesses and single family homes, opposed to apartments. So given the fact that we have the senior citizens complex, the plan is to build community around it and single family homes around it. So really excited about that. We also launched, and we're about 18 months into a diversity procurement program where we are focusing on increasing the amount of money that we spend as a bank with local minority and women-owned businesses. I mean, the bank is an economic driver within this region. As a $2 billion publicly traded company,
That's awesome.
We spend money,
Yeah.
right? So we are really putting an emphasis on doing business locally with underserved entrepreneurs, women-owned business, minority-owned businesses, and making great segue about that. Earlier this year, we signed a significant contract with a local minority woman security firm called Trace Assets Security Firm that will provide all of our branch security for our office locations. It was a great opportunity to support a Black woman entrepreneur and help grow that business here locally. They have almost 100 employees. They're doing tremendously well, and was excited to give them that opportunity. They earned it. It wasn't awarded to them specifically because they were a Black business, but because they were a minority business, we opened it up and gave them an opportunity to bid, and they won it. So really excited for them, and continue to push those priorities as a company from where we're at. So a lot of good things happening there within the banking and finance industry. Yeah, excited about it.
On behalf of a native Buffalonian, thank you to yourself, your team, and the bank for what you're doing to build community. I mean, that's fantastic. I think I saw the Trace ad. Was there an announcement about that recently?
I believe we did it. We signed a contract, I want to say April or May, and I'm sure they did some social media posts around it.
I thought I saw some press on it.
It's a great success story, man, not just for us, but also to highlight the business and really, highlight the importance of doing business locally, specifically with some of the underrepresented entrepreneurs within the space. Like, this is an area where I feel like Western New York and Buffalo is really starting to boom as far as entrepreneurship, small business growth. Over the last decade, I think we've really put ourselves on the map as one of the top areas in the country where if you want to come start a business, there's public sector resources here, there's nonprofit support here, and it's important that the private sector, i.e. the banks, step up and support. So proud to be leading it.
Huge kudos, man. Huge kudos and gratitude. That's awesome. Kind of the penultimate question here as we get near the end. This has been awesome. It's been energizing. I'm curious. We've talked so much about business, so much about community. What do you think but what have you done and what have you seen in your career that by building community, it's helped catalyze growth in your professional career? Any use cases or things that come to mind, even just some learning, some lessons for those that are watching and listening?
For me, it's like personal career success and personal, it's just so intertwined with rebuilding community. I grew up in one of the historically one of the most violent and poorest communities in Pittsburgh, in which gun violence and drug and alcohol abuse was very abundant. And I was just blessed, man, to have a great home life. And it's like, when I say what drove me out of banking is what brought me back. Around 2010 or 11, as I was deep in my bank career, going into a decade, I was just tired of refinancing millions for billionaires, really not having any impact on the inner city core with the resources that these banks had. And at that time, a lot of the banks were not really community centric in that regard. So I left the private sector world and went to nonprofits to do more community centric work. It was just I went to a historic Black college. I'm a graduate of Hampton University. At HBCUs, they really highlight the importance of rebuilding your own community. And that was always driven into me. And when I had the opportunity and platform as my career developed, I wanted to get back into doing that. And Dave Nasca, our CEO of Evans Bank, as a community bank, has always been committed to different pockets within Western New York region, and really created an opportunity for me to do the economic and community development work with the private sector banking resources. But it's always been, professional and personal growth for me has always been contingent on my ability to move the needle within the growth of my community. I think as a young man, still sub 40, I started to realize as I got in my late 20s, like it was on me. It was our time, our generation's time to pick up the ball and to run with it. And like I always judge my own personal and professional success based upon, the tone and the health of my community overall. I think that's really important as a community bank to do. And just for me that, grew up in the community environment that I did, that's now as a father, I just want to improve those conditions for those around me and those that resemble me.
Beautiful. I mean, communities synonymous with relationships. Relationships are what build, friendships, businesses, opportunities. So when you're out there in the community moving and shaking, when we went to was it? Northland, excuse me. It's been a minute since I've been there, so that's a good reminder. I actually thought about that earlier in the conversation. I haven't been to Manna Culinary in a minute.
Shout out to Manna at Northland.
Huge shout out. Some of the best New Orleans based type food cuisine, Cajun kind of based food, right? It's just, I literally am going to go on my calendar today and figure out who's my next lunch and just switch it to that because it's been a minute. But, when I saw we walk in there, seeing, so many different people in there, the respect, the love, the gratitude that those folks have, that's the currency in my opinion. And I think to a lot of people that I know in my career, in my circles, that's the currency that matters most to them. Because if you build that community currency, the dollar currency is going to follow. It will. It may take 15 years, right? Look at the founder of Nike, Phil Knight. It literally took him almost 15 years to finally start actually making a living. 15 years. But when you, like you mentioned earlier, drive and something was driven into you, you have that resolve to stay committed. So it's all relationship building. It really is.
I'm the middle of three boys. I got an older brother that is the most successful person within my sphere that I can tangibly put my hands on. My older brother is one of the top orthopedic spine surgeons in New Jersey's, I think the most, if not the second busiest spine surgeon in New Jersey. One of the only and one of the few African-American spine surgeons within the country and really thriving. Financially, obviously doing extraordinarily well. And I take a lot of motivation and feedback from him. And he told me probably about 6 or 7 years ago, where I was really at a decision point in my career, like, don't chase the money, chase the dream, really try to focus on doing good work. And that's always what he's tried to do within surgery and his surgical practices, is just perfect your craft. And at that moment, I decided that my craft was going to be community development, was going to be finding creative ways to invest into inner city urban cores and urban environments. And that, that was what I was going to specialize in and focus on, and do it authentically and genuinely. And, as I started to dive deeper down that commitment, right, it takes building those relationships. It takes going into the community organically and authentically, with open ears and listening and really a heart to help. And as a result, I have really professionally grown and developed over the last 5 or 6 years. So I find that the more you give others, the more you get in return.
So I like how you just woven heart to help.
Yeah,
that's awesome, man. It's beautiful. You have a heart to help. A lot of good things happen. So, and kudos to your brother. That's an amazing story. I love seeing that. Reminds me of a gentleman named Dr. Carl Cassius, who's a client of Incept. He's one of a few African-American chiropractors that we love supporting. I go there. He's my chiropractor now. And it's just great to see that, that kind of thing, just the support and the energy and the gratitude. So last thing, how do we connect? Where do we find you? If there's any initiatives or things going on, things you'd like to see, I will certainly share notes or links in the notes, excuse me. But how do we find you? And are there anything, articles or things you'd like to share before we adjourn.
Yeah, really excited about the development of single-family homes on Buffalo's east side. That request for proposal is live now.
Cool.
We're going to be doing a number of media outreach events over the next 60 to 90 days that will be pretty prevalent within the community. So excited about that.
We'll get some in the show notes on that for sure.
Best way to find me is always via LinkedIn, and that's where I connected with you. I've always resonated, with the optimistic, perspective that you provide into the community. I think it is so incredibly important.
Thank you.
Right, to fuel that positive attitude within Western New York and within our communities. LinkedIn is always the best way to find me. Royce Woods, MBA. LinkedIn's the only social media platform I have.
Me too, baby.
Other than that, Evans Bank website.
Cool.
Keep an eye out on it. Good things coming.
Good things coming, man. Well, that just about wraps up another Incept Connect podcast. Really appreciate it, Royce. All the work you're doing, who you are, what you represent, and just keep building, keep believing, brother. Thanks for coming, man.
Part of the solution,
man.
Part of the solution, man.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you, man.
I appreciate it,
Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Man. See you on the next show.